So they've given us the difficulty of Consort Radon combined with the nonsense from Bed of Chaos. Well, Gaia Ghost got you covered with 10 tips for beating Everdark Libra. First of all, most players agree that this fight is more manageable solo, so if you're finding that it just keeps falling apart, consider trying single player or a duo run instead. It's easy to get 3 revives for the final fight in solo mode, since you get 1 automatically and there's a Wending Grace in each shop. And the fight is more like Libra with a Mimic tier duo than the shit show it can be with 3 players. This also means that we might finally hear the line from Souls purists, "You didn't summon friends to beat the boss. That's basically easy mode." But ignore that. Kind of like how people complained about Radon being nerfed, only to beg for Radon to be nerfed. Number 2, knowing your damage types. On top of his stated weakness to Madness, he's also weak to Holy, Fire, Poison, and Rot, and more susceptible to slash damage than the other physical types. While not weak to Bleed and Frost, he's also not immune to them, and you can usually get 2 procs of each before it becomes impractical. He is resistant to magic, and Recluse has an S in Faith, but some sorceries tend to land easier than a lot of incantations, so that might be your best DPS option depending on what you found, especially if you have something that debuffs their magic resistance. 3. Taking the right deal. He doesn't always offer the same options, and a lot of the time you may be better off just not making one. This doesn't mean you attack him preemptively without letting your team check. The only offer you should always accept is wish for eventual greatness. Your HP, stamina, and FP will be reduced for 2 minutes, but that's usually when the fight starts getting tangly, at which point all of those stats will increase, allowing you to be what is essentially the level equivalent of a 16 or 17 character. So just play conservatively until the second phase, then you're tankier for when it really matters. Resist Death will refill all your health before your first KO at the cost of slightly reduced max health. This is solid, especially if you're playing as Raider, Guardian, or just have a high Vigor build. If your run didn't go so well, maybe you lost some levels towards the end, gain many levels will give you an extra 3 in exchange for 1 flask. This at least makes a somewhat failed run still possible, but it's far from ideal. Power of a Demon can be really useful when you're swamped by the invaders, but it builds up Madness, and Libra can cast an additional debuff that also builds up Madness, while the crystals left behind by his attack will reduce it and increase your resistance, so you can manage it. It's a risky option, but if you picked up several perks that increase your resistance, or equipped a talisman that does, you can have a passive attack with basically no downside. If you don't have high resistance but you do have high stamina, take the resistance. But if none of these apply, simply don't make a deal. Number 4. Which items to buy on the way into the fight. Crimson Whirl Bubble Tier can be great for maintaining pressure while he brings down the light explosions, as long as you don't get stun-locked or afflicted with madness, which is liable to happen. However, it can occasionally glitch out, leaving you almost invincible depending on which Condemned gets summoned. That being said, Opaline Hard Tier is definitely the safer bet. No matter what happens, it lasts 3 minutes, and at some point you will be taking non-physical damage. If you do get Madness procced at some point, you'll lose some FP and have no Cerulean Flask, so Starlight Shards are more valuable than usual, unless you have a really reliable form of FP recovery. Similarly, the best damage options for this fight aren't physical, and Libra's Madness attacks aren't physical either. And this fight doesn't give you a chance to breathe, So it's one case where the turtleneck is arguably better than the boiled crab or the exalted flesh. Number 5, build for PvP and PvE. By now, most players have a routine and certain weapons, Ashes of War, or spells that they seek out during a run, so that your Nightfarer is decently prepared for the final boss, a single overpowered enemy. As a result, no one has really been prioritizing crowd control or PvP specific builds, so you might be overlooking some of the best options for this situation simply because of habit. Of course, stuff like Sacred Relic Sword, Moog's Spear, and of course, the Frenzied Flame options are good for both bosses and NPCs, but you might not be so lucky. Without listing 100 or so options, think back to what worked for you in Elden Ring PvP. What connects with other players easily or felt almost too cheesy in some situations? And if you didn't try PvP, how did you deal with NPC invaders or led as gank squad? There's also anything with a large area of effect, Gravitas, Onyx Lord's Repulsion, Nebula, etc. Libra can't be parried or backstabbed, but all of the condemned can. Not only is it a decent damage source, there are some perks that activate after a critical hit, increased damage and blood loss on your weapons primarily. So ideally you close in on Libra right after a riposte for some extra damage. You also get a ton of iframes and it prevents the madness from building up further. Considering Libra tends to hit you with an attack right after you engage the invaders, it works out pretty well. I find that I often lock into a backstab animation without actually getting it, so I prefer parries. They also do more damage. There's also invisibility sorceries or Duchess's Art, which can prevent you from getting swarmed, or just having a less likely to be targeted perk can help with this as well. Number 6, the various debuffs or special effects that Libra can activate, one of which is actually very helpful. Obviously, there's Demon Summons Another Condemned, which spawns Night Invaders. You can see a spreadsheet of their equipment here. Demon Shrouds all allies, turns teammates invisible. Demon casts an Inescapable Eye, builds up madness on the team. Demon offers a challenge, cuts both your health and Libra's health down to half of its maximum. Usually, by this time, you've already gotten his health around halfway down, but it's worth remembering that if you're forced to deal with the invaders early, he might do some of the work for you. Demon Preaches Madness, adds madness to Libra's staff. Demon offers a False Blessing. You get unlimited flasks, but lose a level when you use it. This can be mitigated by defeating the condemned or simply waiting it out, which is much easier said than done. And finally, Demon Incites a Riot. Enables friendly fire between Libra and the condemned. If the fight is falling apart and you're completely overrun, just try evading until he eventually casts this. Ideally, you get Libra going on a rampage and lure him into his own summons, or vice versa. I think this might be the intentional approach from the developers, or at least a fail-safe that keeps the fight from being virtually impossible if you allow too many summons in. Number 7, Perk Up. This is true for any Night Lord, but even more so here. If you have a choice between a weapon and a perk, only take the weapon if you really think it will be A, one of your endgame choices, B, you desperately need something to carry you in the meantime, C, it's one of the best weapons for your teammate, or D, it has an ideal passive, so essentially just a better perk than the other option. This way you're significantly more stacked for the final boss. It also means stopping by easier camps is actually worth it, even late game. as they regularly have passives that increase health, stamina regeneration, and damage negation, while bosses generally have more weapons and everjails are more often additional runes or perks that aren't necessarily helpful here. Sudden death on enemy attacks or gradual health restoration are more common, for example. Number 8. Which shifting earth to conjure? Out of all the conjured earth powers, Nocleteo's resurrection buff is almost certainly the best. Or Crater, because frenzied flame weapons aren't the highest level when you find them, so this is the only way I know of to get the ideal build for this fight. Rotted Woods increases your health by 25% and gives you a health rally perk. It also gives you the chance to grab some rock grease or weapons on your way to the end, if you want to go that route, but increased health, rally, and rot damage can all be acquired through relics, perks, and random drops without this. Mountaintop is a 15% damage boost after proccing Frostbite, but after getting 2 procs, his resistance is maxed out, so it's not an effect you can maintain throughout the fight. 9. Drawing aggro and attack openings. If the whole team is focused on the invaders, Libra will send out attacks at the worst possible times for you. It's ideal to have one player draw his aggro while the other 2 take out the condemned, but with everyone occasionally hitting the enemies that their teammates are fighting. This gives you a moment where enemies shift their attention, allowing you to get some easy hits in. Most of Libra's combos are followed by a madness attack, either an explosion or projectiles, forcing you to adopt a sort of hit and run strategy. Some exceptions are the 2 attacks resembling lava, one from the sky and another like a wave, and his staff combo. You can get some light attacks in during it, and his last overhead strike can be easily sidestepped, giving you a fairly large window to punish him. These are your best chances to stagger him if you've been keeping the pressure up. Number 10. Practice makes perfect. If you're getting discouraged and find the fight too chaotic and overwhelming, which it is, try running the regular equilibrious beast, which is still far from easy, and make a point of learning to dodge all of his attacks here, even if you could steamroll him. He gets a few additional moves in the Everdark version, but they're mainly just the highly telegraphed attacks where he calls down a beam, or cross-section of what I assume is counterfeit gold, based on his lore description. So dodging him is essentially the same here. This way you'll be a little less thrown off when he jumps into the fray as you're fighting 2 of yourself, or when drawing his aggro for your team. Maybe. It also plays a role in the friendly fire debuff, since you'll have an easier time trolling him into his teammates when you know what all his telegraphs and timings are. No matter how well prepared you are, you can still get wiped from just attacks coming from off screen or being put in an almost no-win situation. But if you follow these tips with a little luck and some persistence, you'll get him before too long. And be sure to drop back next time when I take a look at the lore of Libra, the equilibrious beast, and how it plays into the long-running symbolism of the Soul series.